Hello and welcome to our latest webinar that we're having today here at Advanta IRA. We're going to talk today about self-directing your retirement account, but for people who are more active in the investing space. A few weeks ago, we did a webinar centered really on people who are more passive investing, but today we're going to talk about more investments and schemes and strategies that skew more to people who are going to be more active and involved on a day-to-day basis with their self-directed IRA and the investments that they're holding. My name is Scott Maurer. I'm our Vice President of Sales here at Advanta IRA. I've been with the company for a number of years, done a lot of different things at Advanta IRA, seen a lot of different types of investments, whether active or passive, during my time here at Advanta IRA. If you have any questions after the webinar, either about self-directed IRAs or some of the investments that we're discussing today, please don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email at the information here on this slide. If you are listening to the event live today, you have the ability to type any questions for me into the question box on your screen. I'll make sure I get to those prior to the end of our time today. But if you're listening to the recorded version, or if you simply want to contact me afterwards, please reach out to me either at this phone number or at the email on this particular slide. Just a quick disclaimer: Advanta IRA and its employees, we do not provide investment advice or endorse any particular investment products. The materials, the information we provide are for educational purposes only. And while we do talk about legal, tax, and other types of consequences in regards to your retirement accounts, we cannot advise in those particular spaces. And we're happy to provide you with referrals to CPAs or attorneys or financial advisors who could assist you and would be able to give you that type of advice. For those of you who are not unfamiliar with Advanta IRA, just a little bit of background on our company. We've been around for almost 20 years now in the industry. The only thing we do at Advanta IRA is the administration and record keeping for self-directed retirement accounts. We currently have over $2.5 billion in assets under management, over 12,000 active clients that we hold in our office. We're located primarily in the Tampa Bay area. That's where our headquarters are, but we work with clients all over the country, and we do assign every new account to a dedicated account manager, someone in our office who will oversee anything and everything regarding an individual's particular account. I think that account manager service is really what sets us apart in the industry, and being able to provide the type of customer service that individuals should expect and should receive regarding their retirement accounts. If you haven't heard of self-directed IRAs before, the reason is most likely that you have an IRA, or maybe you have an old 401k account with a bank or an investment broker or brokerage firm who offers you limited investment products. They only allow you to invest in certain assets that they own, or they control, or they sell, or that are available on their platform. But the IRS regulations, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment, allow for a much broader range of investments. There are a lot of things you can do outside of your IRA at a bank or your IRA at a brokerage firm. Less than 4%, maybe 5% at this point of self-directed account of IRAs are self-directed. So not very many people know about this. And again, it's largely due to the fact that most individuals who you work for a company, you develop your 401k account, and you're limited within those accounts as to where you can place those funds. And people who have IRAs that they have rolled over, they have started again. Most people don't realize that they have these options that we're going to talk about today, because the banks, the brokerage firms simply don't advertise to their clients the ability to invest in a lot of different alternative assets. As we talk today about self-directed IRAs and using these monies for active real estate investments or active investments in general, it's important to note which type of accounts can be self-directed. What retirement funds, what monies do I have that I could use with these strategies? The accounts that we hold here at Advanta IRA. It's important to note, I'm not going to go into details about each of these different accounts on this screen, but any type of IRA, a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, which are usually tied to individuals, the SEP and the simple IRA that are found a lot in small businesses. Any type of IRA, if your account designation on your statement shows IRA, you can move money to a self-directed account and invest in some of the assets we're going to talk about today. In addition to any type of IRA, if you have any type of former employer plan, So you have an old 401k, an old 403b, an old 457 plan, those types of retirement vehicles, you can also roll those accounts into a self-directed IRA and be able to invest. The only restriction really when it comes to retirement accounts and which monies you can use are your current employer plans. So if you do work for an employer who offers you a 401k or you're taking part in your 403b because you're a teacher, you may be restricted from moving money within those current plans as long as you are still employed there. But once you become a former employer, there is no issue with rolling those monies out tax-free into an IRA account and be able to invest from that point going forward. In addition to the IRAs and the old 401ks, we do offer solo or individual 401k plans for people who own their own businesses, and it'll enable you to put a lot more money away each year, get larger tax deductions for your contributions. And although they're not retirement accounts, both education savings and health savings accounts can be self-directed through Advanta IRA. Again, both of those accounts also offer similar tax benefits and savings for those specific purposes. If you want to learn more about education or health savings accounts, I'd encourage you to check out our YouTube page. Where we do record all of the webinars, including the one you're listening today for later playback. And we have some specific webinars that talk about each of the different types of accounts that we're discussing here on this slide. So I mentioned a moment ago, there are certain rules, there's certain restrictions and regulations the IRS has when it comes to what you can and what you can't do within your IRA account. And again, it's important to note the only prohibited investments that you cannot hold inside of an IRA are either life insurance or life insurance policies, and anything the IRS would deem is a collectible. And that kind of would, generally speaking, we're talking antiques, alcohol, artwork, stamps, coins, things of that nature, where the value might be a little bit more subjective. If you're thinking of a piece of artwork, different people can look at the same painting, same piece of art, and have a completely different valuation. And that's important when we talk about IRAs, is a valuation, because valuations are used for tax purposes, the IRS for distributions later in life. So it's one of the reasons why they don't allow collectibles as investments inside of an IRA account. Now, there are some coins that are permitted, this specifically the US gold and silver American Eagles, because those coins are, the value of those coins are based on the value of the actual metal, not because they are rare or unique. So again, the IRS restrictions, it allows for a very broad range of investments, because they say simply the two things you cannot do are life insurance and collectibles. And there's also then a restriction, though, the IRS has on who your IRA can transact with. So life insurance and collectibles, fairly straightforward. We don't get a lot of questions day to day on those types of investments, but where we do get questions is the IRS restrictions they have on in doing something that is prohibited with an IRA. That would be making an investment that is otherwise allowed, but depending on who you were transacting with or who may be getting a benefit from that investment, may then disqualify the investment itself. So the IRS does prohibit a transaction between your IRA and certain disqualified persons, and they also prohibit any disqualified person, which includes you as the IRA owner, from receiving any type of benefit from the investment that you hold inside the IRA account. So obviously, next slide we'll talk about who the disqualified persons are. Obviously, that's the very important thing to note to determine if the investment you're making, which would otherwise be permitted because it's real estate or it's a private loan or a mortgage or a note or something like that, it could be prohibited depending on if there's any disqualified person involved in the transaction or receiving any type of benefit. The other thing I'll just touch on briefly is the UBIT or UDFI tax. These are little known taxes that can actually apply to IRA accounts. If an IRA is invested and receiving business income as opposed to investment income, you can subject your IRA to this tax called unrelated business income tax. The IRS expects that your IRAs are going to be invested on a passive basis. They are not being used in an active business like restaurants, retail stores, things like that. If your IRA is invested in one of those types of entities where you are receiving a portion of business profits each month, you can subject your IRA to that tax. Likewise, if your IRA is investing into leveraged real estate, The IRS will levy unrelated debt financed income tax against your IRA account. So if your IRA is making a down payment on a property and getting the balance in a mortgage, you can subject your IRA to this particular tax. Now, it's important to note prohibited investments, the life insurance and collectibles, and the prohibited transactions when you're dealing with the disqualified persons, those are not allowed within the IRA account. However, you can invest in a business, you can invest in leveraged real estate. That is permissible, but you would just have the UBIT or UDFI tax to deal with. Again, now we talk about disqualified persons. Again, your IRA cannot transact with, or these individuals cannot get a benefit from the asset held in your IRA account. And for your IRA, the disqualified persons include yourself as the IRA holder, your spouse, your parents and grandparents, your kids and grandkids, and any business or entity that is owned or controlled by one of these parties. So a couple of quick examples. If you owned a piece of real estate personally, you cannot sell it to your IRA account, or vice versa. If your IRA buys a piece of real estate, you cannot sell it to one of these disqualified persons. None of these individuals could lease property from your IRA account. So if you own a rental property, say in a college town, you can't rent that property out to your son or daughter. Those would be prohibited transactions within the realm of IRS Section 4975. Additionally, none of these individuals should get any kind of benefit from the asset in the IRA. So if your IRA owns a rental property or a piece of real estate on the beach or in the mountains, nice little cabin, you or any disqualified person would be prohibited from staying or using the property in any capacity, whether you were staying for free or paying your IRA rent. Both of those would be prohibited transactions. So again, we don't get a lot of these questions necessarily, but it is important to note, especially in the real estate realm, that the disqualified persons rules can certainly come up and be applicable to what you're doing if you are involving one of the individuals on this particular slide. So why, I think, one of the things we get asked is, why would I use my retirement account? Why are my retirement funds a good capital source for people who are maybe raising capital? I think for a lot of individuals, what the IRA provides is that you can simply invest. It says repeat investing on the slide, but it's essentially, if you are a real estate investor personally, you're able to invest again simply by using your retirement accounts to take advantage of another new asset that you come across. So it gives you an additional source of funds to use for those investments. You don't need any outside approval. If it's your IRA account, you make the simple decision to make the investment itself. Presumably, if you are looking into alternative assets like the ones we're going to talk about today, you may get better returns from your money by making investments into real estate, notes, mortgages, tax liens, private placements, gold, silver, things like that. The things that you can make within a self-directed IRA account, you presumably would do that because you're going to get a better return than maybe where the money is sitting now. Now, maybe money markets aren't paying 1 or 2% anymore with interest rates higher, but some individuals still want to stay out of the stock market, or at least hedge their bets and get some of their money self-directed. The other big reason I think individuals like to use retirement accounts for this type of alternative investing is that if you come across an investment opportunity that you don't want to miss out on, hey, this is a really good property, this is a really good investment, a startup company, I don't want to miss out on this investment, you have two sources of money to use. You could use your personal cash or your savings, or potentially you could use your IRA or your retirement account. And for a lot of individuals, they don't want to touch their savings account. They don't want to touch their personal cash because that's what they need for emergencies, right? If there's a medical emergency, loss of job, things like that, you would want to have access to that money very quickly. And you don't want to lock your money up into a piece of real estate or some type of holding that might have a 3 to 5 year hold time. But most individuals don't plan on touching their IRAs until they hit retirement age because of the potential penalties and taxes that come for early withdrawals. So if you're going to invest in something for a longer period of time, it makes sense to use your IRA account to hold that asset because you're not planning on liquidating it anyway. You can sit back and get the income from that investment piling back into your IRA account on an annual basis. Leave your personal money, leave your savings account there for that rainy day or for that emergency fund if you need it. So some examples of just the alternative assets that are out there. Like I said, I mentioned real estate a lot. And that's reality is because probably 70% or more of the assets that we hold in Advanta IRA, and I'm guessing that are self-directed in general, are real estate in nature. Could be rental properties, could be commercial, rehab project, duplexes, people investing in multifamily and real estate syndications. So a lot of what we see is real estate based, even land and private loans and private mortgages, things of that nature. In addition to the real estate, we do see a lot of private placements. Could be hedge funds, could be startup companies, could be some of the multifamily syndications. We see a lot of precious metals and people investing in gold and silver and holding that within their account. We see a lot of people investing into oil and gas bonds as well. So the common thread with all of these different assets that you see, some of which have really no connection to each other, the one connection they at least do all share is that they all are what we consider to be an alternative asset. And more likely than not, you probably can't invest in these assets using an IRA with a Fidelity or with a Schwab, with a Morgan Stanley, with one of those brokerage firms, because they simply are electing not to hold the asset. They could, if they wanted to hold this type of investment on their platform, they could, but it simply doesn't fit within their business model. Somebody just asked, what about crypto? Absolutely. We have clients who have purchased and invested in cryptocurrency within their IRA account. So again, the common thread, the brokerage firms aren't going to hold it. We can at Advanta IRA when it comes to these types of alternative assets. So again, the focus of a lot of today's today's webinar is really focusing on the active investor, or at least what we're going to talk about, what we consider and define as an active investor. All investments for self-directed IRAs are really intended to generate passive income. So I don't want to conflate passive income with being, say, an active investor, because you still want to generate passive income back to your IRA account, so you don't have that UBIT, that tax issue with business income. Rents, dividends, interest income, profits from the sale of property, things like that. That is all still considered passive income. So when I'm talking about active strategies versus passive strategies, I'm talking about the involvement of the investor as an individual. Their time, the time allotment they put into the investment, the amount of detail, the amount of responsibilities they may have as an investor themselves. When we talk about active strategies, we're talking again about real estate. You have rental properties, whether it's a short-term Airbnb, whether it's a long-term 12-month tenants that you have in place, even buying raw land and leasing some of the land for timber harvesting. We've had clients make that type of investment as well. Obviously, people doing real estate rehabs, that's definitely going to be something that's more active strategy, as you have to manage and take care of and pay attention to your vendors and your contractors, whatnot, who are performing the rehab itself. The tax deed and tax lien investing, going out and finding those particular properties and doing a lot of research is involved with that type of strategy. We're going to touch today on the checkbook control, which is a strategy where you utilize an LLC that is owned 100% by your IRA account. And that structure then allows you to buy a number of different investments inside this one LLC, giving you a great deal of control over not only the assets, but the funds in the account. But again, that is going to take more of your time to manage this particular LLC. There is a strategy we're not going to touch on today, but happy to discuss offline, called a ROBS plan, or a rollover for business startup plan, where individuals can use their retirement accounts to actually start their own business. Laundromat, car wash, had people start a convenience store, had individuals buy FedEx routes through their retirement account by using a ROBS type structure. And again, that's going to definitely be more active, because in that case, you are working for that particular business. Contrasted with that, passive strategies, syndications, partnerships, private stock, private lending, even precious metals, where a lot of the work that you're doing to make that investment is really just upfront, right? It's evaluating the investment itself, making the decision to invest or to not invest, or how much am I going to invest, and what types of sources of funds am I going to use for that investment. But once the investment is made, there's not a lot for you to do. There's maybe not as much control that you're going to have over the investment. So again, when we're talking today about active versus passive, it's not active income versus passive income, because again, IRAs are still generating predominantly passive income back to the account. It's really how involved you are as an investor. And I think that's a good question, I think, for individuals to discuss with themselves, right? To look in the mirror and have that, heart to heart with yourself and decide, am I somebody who wants to be more in control? I want to be making the decisions. I want to be hands-on. And if you're doing that, you're using a little bit more of your time and energy. Obviously, you're going to be responsible for the details. Those assets tend to be people wanting to do rentals and rehabs or wholesaling or tax liens, tax deeds, the checkbook control type structures where you are responsible and in control of that entire investment. Again, contrasting with the people who may be passive, who don't have the time commitment to be a landlord, to manage a rental property, or to manage a rehab project, and that don't want to be bothered by the minutia. As we all know, I'm sure all of us know people who would fit into both sides of the spectrum. People who are maybe a little bit more type A personalities, want to be in control and making all the decisions. There are other people who are more passive and say, hey, I'll give you the money. You make the investment. Don't bother me with the details. As long as you pay me back, what we've agreed on as far as a return, I'll be satisfied with that. And so the individuals doing that are giving up the control. They don't have any say in the decision making, but they're also not being bothered or spending as much time maybe on the investment as a whole. Again, definitely involved up front with the due diligence and evaluating the investment, but over the time of the life of the investment, not as much commitments involved. These are private placement syndications, private lending, those types of deals, again, where a lot of the work is done up front on the evaluating. As far as which is the best strategy for you, and we'll discuss this for a moment before we start getting into some of the case studies and illustrating really the more active strategies and what's involved with self-directed IRAs. I really think finding the balance that motivates you, right, is considering your interests, your expertise, with those rules in mind. Again, there's certain things you can and can't do. If your IRA is going to be investing in a rehab project, the rules prohibit you from doing the work. That's one of the prohibited transactions. Your IRA paying you to do the work, or even you providing that work free. As a disqualified person, you can't do that. So if that's a problem, then maybe a rehab within your IRA would not work for you. But really, what time allotment do I have? What considerations do I have? Consult with an attorney, with a CPA, really try to figure out which is maybe the best way, best strategy for you to utilize. There are plenty of networking groups. We host a live event once a month. I want to highlight that at the end of today, where you can reach out and network with other individuals and learn from them. But almost every community in the U.S. around a decent either metropolitan area or even in smaller cities and towns have real estate investing clubs and investment groups where you can go and learn from other people, bounce your ideas off of them, and probably learn from them really, okay, which strategy is going to be best for me? What types of assets do I want to hold in my particular account? And I think it's important to also understand the exit strategies with the more or less responsibilities. If you invest in a syndication, a multifamily project, for example, you're simply at the mercy and kind of just waiting on the property to refinance or to sell. And at that point, that's your exit strategy. You're going to get paid back. But if you're buying a piece of real estate, you may be entering that project with the idea that you're going to hold it as a long-term rental, but in turn you get into it, you decide I'm going to flip this, or vice versa. So again, I think really understanding the investment itself and outlining kind of what I want as my exit strategy, how much control do I want to have over that, will help dictate which assets you might lean towards. Somebody had a good question just came up. Can I loan myself money from my self-directed IRA account? So the answer, unfortunately, to that is no. The IRS, you are a disqualified person. Your IRA cannot transact with you, and so your IRA lending money to you, your IRA is a lender, you are a borrower. That is a prohibited transaction with IRA accounts. Now, some of you listening may say, hey, I've borrowed from my 401k before. Was that prohibited? The answer is no, because you can borrow from a 401k account. There are some limitations as to how much and when you have to pay the money back. But that is a difference between IRAs and 401k accounts. So you can borrow from a 401k if your plan allows for it. But any type of IRA, regardless of where it's held, you personally cannot borrow money from your IRA account. Great. So a couple great questions came in. Again, if you're listening to the webinar and have other, please throw them into the question box and we will get to them during the webinar today. But we're going to jump into our first case study, rental property. Common investment that we've seen throughout my entire time at Advanta. I've been here for, like I said, over 17 years, seen a lot of different assets. This is something that people were investing in before I started and then continued to invest in today. And in this particular deal, the facts outlined, we have John who's got money in an old 401k account. There is a rental property, down the street from his house, maybe in his neighborhood, somewhere that's a little bit local to him where he can keep an eye on it. Because if he's going to be renting the property and doing some of that, legwork with the tenants, the contractors and whatnot, if there's any repairs, you might want to have that property a little closer to him. So John finds this house, he wants to buy it. To get the property inside the IRA, what are the steps? For John, he needs to open up an account, fill out paperwork with us, and then request a rollover from his old 401k. Moving money from an old 401k to an IRA, again, is a non-taxable event. It's called a direct rollover. So that money goes from his old 401k into the IRA. John, because he's buying this rental property, needs to go find it. Actually, maybe he found it before he came to Advanta, but he's responsible for finding the property, doing his due diligence, being comfortable with the neighborhood, being comfortable with what the rental comps are in the area if he's going to be renting this property, being comfortable with getting an appraisal done or getting an inspection done. But ultimately, he's going to make an offer to purchase the property. And ultimately going to tell Advanta, hey, I'm buying this property. Here's the contract. I need you to help me now get this purchased inside of my IRA account. So at Advanta, we're going to get his account opened. We're going to give him the instructions to get the funds rolled over from the 401k. And then when it comes to the real estate, we will work with John. We will work with the closing agent to make sure that all of the documents, the title commitments, the deed, the settlement statements, all need to reflect that his IRA account is the owner of this particular asset. And I'll have on the next slide an example what that wording looks like. And then ultimately, once John reviews and approves the paperwork, we will sign the documents on behalf of his IRA and wire the funds out for the closing. Now, we will not sign documents. We will not wire money for this investment until John has explicitly signed off and approved of the transaction and of the closing figures and things like that. Advanta, we will then hold the deed, all the documents, and going forward, we will receive all the income from this property and pay any expenses out of the IRA. So on this slide I mentioned a moment ago, the property, and this really goes for any asset that is purchased in a self-directed IRA, it's important that the property is purchased in the name of the IRA account. So the name on the contract, the name on the deed, the name on the settlement statement would be Advanta IRA for benefit of John Smith's IRA and his account number. And this demonstrates to the IRS that this rental property is owned by his retirement account. So all of the income that's generated, the profits from any sale, all is going to be going tax deferred back into his IRA account. There is no tax consequence to him from the money coming out of his IRA to make the purchase either. This is an IRA asset, the same as if he was buying a mutual fund. It should be treated the exact same tax-wise, but this is a piece of real estate. It's just a different type of asset, but that's the wording that needs to be used, and John's account manager will work with him to make sure that the documents reflect, all the closing documents reflect that name on the asset. In this example, John is using just his IRA funds for the purchase. It is possible if John wanted to partner with other individuals, including himself, that is possible to do. When your IRA, if your IRA doesn't have enough cash, you use part of your personal funds, maybe you use part of your spouse's IRA funds or a friend's IRA, and then split the income and expenses proportionally. This is different from doing a transaction. So the 4975 rules we talked about earlier prohibit John from lending himself money from the IRA or vice versa, or for him buying a property and then later selling it to his IRA. When you're partnering, you and your IRA are not transacting with each other, kind of on opposite sides of the deal. You and your IRA are both buyers buying property from a seller, and then you're splitting the income and expenses going forward according to the percentages of ownership. That type of an arrangement is acceptable. Now, as long as you won't be able to change the percentages going forward because that would necessitate a prohibited transaction. But if you're buying it at the outset from a third party with both IRA funds and somebody else's funds, as long as you're splitting the income and expenses proportionally, there's no reason you can't do that. So do want to make that clear. Partnering is permitted. Transacting on opposite sides of the deal is not. And again, all the income, the rents, et cetera, are going to come back to the IRA tax-free. So John, he's doing his due diligence to find the property. If it needs any maintenance before he can get it rented, he's working with the contractors to do that. And the income, he's going to go out to find a tenant and have that tenant send their rents back into his IRA, and that'll be going in again tax-free. So the expenses, though. So this is a rental property. It's an ongoing real estate. Anyone who owned real estate knows you have expenses throughout the year, whether that's property taxes, insurance, just regular maintenance items, HOA fees, things like that. If your IRA owns a piece of real estate, your IRA must pay for all those expenses. So John, as the active investor that he is, needs to be sending a copy of these invoices to Advanta to get us to pay them out of his account. Or he can log into the Advanta IRA online portal and actually submit and pay those bills. We allow people to pay up to bills up to $10,000 just by logging into their account online and submitting that payment. The alternative, John could certainly get a property manager to collect the rents, pay the bills, and send the net each month back to the IRA. When it comes to renting the property, as I mentioned already, John, as the IRA owner, needs to select and qualify as tenants. Advanta IRA will sign the leases on behalf of the IRA account and receive all of the rent and deposit it back into his account. The terms, though, the IRA, John needs to negotiate the terms of the lease. Typically the IRA owner is the contact for any issues. We're not, Advanta IRA does not take calls from tenants and send out a plumber or a repair person. That is up to the IRA owner to do it. And again, as I mentioned in the last slide, there are some clients who use property management firms to handle some of those issues. So, you're still maybe an active investor with these rental properties, but you're using a property manager to help lighten the load a little bit on your work. Because again, the rules prohibit you from paying yourself for any of this work. So if you're going out and negotiating the lease with the tenant, you're arranging for your contractors, you're sending the bills for Advanta, you cannot be compensated or paid for your time in doing that. So with this particular investment strategy, the property rents for $2,200 a month. He works with the tenant to get that rent check to Advanta. Any contractors, the maintenance items, he gets those paid out of the account. So the property taxes, the insurance average around $700 a month. Again, that gets paid out of his IRA by Advanta IRA. He sends us the bills or does it through the online portal. And the net rent simply comes back to his IRA. That's what's accruing, again, tax deferred back into his account. That other cash that's coming in, he could use it to purchase other alternative assets, or he could move that money back to a brokerage IRA if he wants. You're allowed to transfer money between IRA accounts as often and whenever you'd like. So if John has an IRA at Schwab or Fidelity, he could take that $1,500 a month and simply send it back there if he wishes. When the property sells down the line, whether that's a year or 10 years down the line, the sales proceeds, again, because the IRA owns the asset, will all come back to his IRA account itself. Again, tax deferred. Our next example is a condo renovation. Someone finding a property that needs a little fix up. In this example, Alexis has $250K in her SEP IRA account. She's a member of a local real estate group, and she's, there's an investor at the meeting saying, hey, I got a property, there's a condo, it needs a lot of repair, and therefore it's really this property right now, you can purchase it for $150. Once you get the repairs done, Alexis, after looking at the property, seeing what needs to be done, says, hey, if I get this property purchased for $150, I'd do a little bit of repair, I could sell this property for $275. And so she brings her general contractor in to look over the property, estimate the cost of what's involved. So again, she's going to have to be more active on this. This isn't finding the property and waving a magic wand and it gets fixed up. She's going to have to be involved with the contractor, choosing the finishes, choosing what work she wants to be done, et cetera, make sure the contractor gets paid by the IRA as well. But the same initial process as we saw in the last example. She's going to work with her account manager at Advanta to make sure all the closing documents get properly listed with her IRA account as the buyer, again, transferring money from her SEP over into an account with Advanta. There is no tax consequence to move money from the SEP IRA to a SEP IRA here at Advanta IRA. There's no tax consequence for that. Again, no tax consequence for her IRA through Advanta to send the money to actually close on this particular property. You can see the contract price. She ended up getting it for 140 and was able to, the closing costs, her final purchase price was 155K all in to get the property acquired. Again, she will have to review and approve all closing documents for Advanta before we sign and send any money out for closing. The renovation cost, she figured about $40,000 in materials, $15,000 in labor. So she bought it for 155, another 55 in renovation costs. So all in, it was 210K for her investment. So she had another 40K of backup in her SEP, which is if you're doing these types of projects, you want to have some extra cash available, because if your IRA buys the property, your IRA must pay for all expenses. So if her materials or labor costs ran high, she would want to make sure she had the extra cash in her IRA to get those bills paid. She was able to sell the property for 270 and netted after closing 250K. So you subtract that from what she spent, 40K profit back in her SEP IRA for this 3-month renovation done in the SEP IRA account. So we're talking about a renovation property, managing it. Again, the repairs and the maintenance, Alexis, despite the fact that she may be as handy as they come and doing repairs, putting in new countertops, things like that, she is not permitted to do any of those services. That same IRS code section 4975 prohibits her from doing that type of activity, but she would need to pay somebody else to do it. And that could be any non-disqualified person. Does not have to be a licensed contractor or a specific individual. Just can't be somebody who's disqualified. And her IRA would need to pay that person to do the work. She can certainly inspect the work. She can, again, help maybe choose what work is going to be done in the first place. So she's involved very actively from that standpoint, but she can't be too active and actually do the work itself. That has to be done by a third party and then paid for by her IRA account. So the last active structure or active strategy that we're going to discuss a little bit today could be used with the prior two examples, and it's certainly going to could be used with the last kind of structure we're going to go through. But the checkbook control, we talked about earlier as a structure where you set up an LLC that is owned by your IRA account. So it's a brand new LLC, a limited liability company. The single owner is your IRA, and you name yourself as a manager of that particular entity, which enables you then to get more control over the cash, because you would have Advanta IRA in that instance send money from your account to the bank account for the LLC, and then as manager of the LLC, you're able to issue the payments directly out of the account, receive and deposit income back into that LLC's bank account. The last two examples we went through really are what we call the custodial, or I call the custodial method, where the administrator, in this case Advanta IRA, we hold on to the cash, we make the investments at your direction, we pay the bills at your direction, and anytime any income comes in, it gets deposited directly back to your Advanta IRA account. The checkbook control account would allow either John or Alexis to have purchased that piece of real estate through the LLC. In Alexis's case, all of the work on the rehab, she could have paid those contractors and paid for the materials right out of the LLC bank account. And at closing, her profit, the final closing amount, would just come and deposited right back into that LLC bank account. For John in the first example, same thing. He would have bought the property using the LLC and sending money out of the account to do it. And every month, his tenant would send a rent check back to the LLC, deposit it to the account, and any expenses, the property taxes, the HOA fees, things like that would be paid out of the LLC bank account. So this is a structure that allows an individual to get a great deal of control over the money in their account. Now, one thing I want to make sure I state is that using an LLC, or if you are using an LLC, you are still bound by the same rules against not buying life insurance and collectibles and not doing any type of prohibited transactions with a disqualified person. So you can't put your IRA funds into an LLC and then loan yourself money, or use it to buy a property that you want to live in. It's still the same rules still apply. The checkbook control LLC is just giving you more flexibility for making the investment itself. One good question came in. I'll deal with that one in just a few moments. But when we go through the checkbook LLC rules, again, it has to be a manager-managed LLC, and the manager is typically the IRA owner themselves as an individual. It can include more than just your IRA. If you wanted to bring in other partners, you can do that. But again, ownership in the LLC, the percentages would be based on the initial contributions. And when you do use more than one owner, you cannot change percentages later on down the line with those disqualified persons. You typically, the LLC is probably going to have provisions relating to the prohibited transaction rules. For individuals who do what I term or deem the kind of true checkbook control, where it's just one IRA and one LLC, so it's a single member LLC, the single member being your IRA account. If it is that kind of pure form of a checkbook control, there's no tax return required. The LLC is a disregarded entity for tax purposes, and therefore the LLC does not have to file any type of tax return. There is case law to support this type of structure with an individual acting as the manager of their LLC, and you can see the sites there for the Swanson case and also the TL Ellis case, which allow for and support the IRA owner acting as a manager. Again, as long as you're not being paid, you're not paying yourself, you can set up this type of structure. So our last case study, and I'll get to some of the questions that have come in, and certainly if anyone has any more as we get through this case study, please don't hesitate to throw those in there. Joe has $50,000 in a brokerage account and wants to invest in tax deeds and tax liens at the local county auctions, I should say. Anyone who's ever purchased property at a county auction, whether it's actual real estate or the tax liens or tax deeds, each county is a little bit different, but some of them want payment right then and there. They don't give you much of a grace period. So having the ability to write the check yourself is key, and it actually helps speed up the process and makes those investments possible. So for using a checkbook LLC, Joe is going to, again, open up his account with Advanta, transfer tax-free the existing IRA account over to us. His next step is to form an LLC with whatever state he wishes. He would file the articles of organization for the LLC. The articles of organization should not mention the IRA account. Now, the articles are only what is filed with the state. Typically, it just lists the name of the LLC, the address, and whoever the manager is. It does not contain any other provisions, any other details. A lot of states, it's a 1 or 2 page form that gets filed. And those articles, again, should not mention the IRA itself. What we do and where Advanta will want to see documentation for the IRA and this LLC is in the operating agreement. Now, the LLC operating agreement is the document that outlines how the LLC is to be run and obviously operated, who's in charge of it, what's different provisions. I've seen operating agreements that are 3 pages long. I've seen operating agreements that are 30 pages long. So it's really up to you on what all provisions you include. But the one provision that we need to see at Advanta is that the IRA account is the sole member. So you see the same wording there that we used on the last 2 examples when they were buying real estate. The deeds needed to reflect the IRA account as the owner. In this case, with the operating agreement, that is the ownership paperwork for the LLC. So we need to see that the operating agreement reflecting the IRA account as the sole member. And again, Joe, as the account owner, is acting as a manager, not a member. He doesn't have any personal ownership in it. It's just his IRA, but he is listed as the manager itself. We will sign the operating agreement on behalf of the IRA account. Joe will go to a bank, get a bank account open for the LLC, and we will wire money from the bank, from the IRA into the LLC's bank account. And so now Joe has his LLC established. His $50,000 of cash is in the LLC bank account for him to then go to the auctions, buy the tax liens, buy the tax deeds, and when he is a successful bidder, he simply wires money from that LLC account or cuts them a check, whatever payment they require, to bid and purchase those particular tax liens. Now, as those tax liens pay off, the income, the county is going to send that check, that income back to his LLC bank account. and he's just going to keep rolling that money and continue moving. Now, the advantage for using an LLC in this fashion are a couple. One, the ease of payment for the tax liens. Again, if you're in a county that wants payment fairly quickly, the LLC allows you to, Joe in this case, to simply pay right then and there on the spot. If he's buying from several different counties and maybe in several different denominations, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, it keeps his administrative costs low. He's only going to pay Advanta one flat annual fee for the LLC asset, and he can be buying multiple tax liens throughout the year and not paying Advanta any additional fees to do so because he is handling it inside of the LLC. Again, much more active type of investment that Joe is pursuing here. If there are any expenses from buying the tax liens or tax deeds, those would be paid out of the LLC's bank account. So the checkbook LLC, again, is just a strategy to make the exact same investments, the real estate, the notes, mortgages, private placements. You can do all types of different investments through the LLC. It's just giving him a great deal more control over those assets and ultimately what he is purchasing. Before we kind of get ready to wrap up here, I'll go over a couple questions that came in. Someone said, if the IRA has 200,000 and the property costs 500K, can we apply for a loan in the bank similar to a rental mortgage loan? So great question. Early on in the presentation, we talked about the prohibited transaction rules, where there are certain disqualified persons and different transactions that cannot be done. One of the things I failed to mention that time, is that a disqualified person is prohibited from lending their credit or their guarantee for the benefit of the IRA. So if you did use your IRA, basically in this example that we're given here, as a down payment, the IRA owner cannot then personally guarantee the loan from the bank. So the only type of loans that are permitted to IRA accounts are what we deem non-recourse loans. So the bank lends money to the IRA, and there is no personal guarantee. So your IRA puts down the 200K, your IRA borrows the other 300K of your example, but you cannot personally guarantee that loan. And due to the fact that there's no personal guarantee, you may find it difficult to get that type of loan. Additionally, with this example, if you're borrowing money and leveraging the property, you will subject the IRA to that UDFI tax that we talked about earlier. Another question, can we include IRA money and checking account after tax money as a partner? So my IRA, 200K, property's $1 million, can I bring in 100K from my bank account and apply for the remaining amount as a mortgage? Again, yes, you can use your IRA funds and personal money together to purchase an investment, as long as you do it from the outset of the purchase. And you will share the income and expenses proportionally. So if you're using 200K IRA, 100K personally, that would be, your IRA owns 2/3, you own 1/3. You can do that and share the income and expenses. However, if you're going to take that money combined and still go to a bank to get a mortgage amount for the rest, it would still have to be a non-recourse loan. Again, it would subject your IRA to taxes for that UDFI. If you do combine both personal and IRA funds into an investment, let's say that there was no mortgage involved and you just paid cash, so you used, say, 200K IRA, 100K personally, and you bought a $300,000 asset, then Advanta would receive 2/3 of the income, and the other 1/3 of the income would have to go to you. So if you were working with tenants, that can require you to have your tenant make out 2 checks, one to the IRA for its share, one to you personally for your share. And for expenses, we can pay part of the bill and send a check, and you would send a check personally for the other. And that may sound to some of you that that's kind of a pain or a little bit of aggravation to do that. And that's where people have used an LLC for that type of investment, where you put personal money into the LLC, you put your IRA funds in, you set the percentages of ownership, and when you buy that property through the LLC, your tenant simply sends a rent check to your LLC each month, and it gets deposited, and any bills you pay out of that LLC, and you're still doing so on that basically de facto percentage, because your IRA owns a percentage of the LLC and you personally own a percent of the LLC. So it is possible to partner, and depending on what you're looking to do, some people may use an LLC to do so. Another great question, is a checkbook IRA and solo 401k the same? No, they are not. The checkbook IRA is what we just talked about here in case study 3, where the IRA opens up and owns its own LLC to make different types of investments. The solo 401k is a different type of retirement plan where if you're a self-employed individual, you don't have any employees, you can set up your own personal 401k plan that has larger contribution limits. And the rules for 401ks are a little bit different than IRAs. You could set up, if you're eligible and you set up a solo 401k account, you can go to a bank and get a bank account opened in the name of your solo 401k, and you would not need to take the step to set up the LLC. But with IRA accounts, you cannot simply open up your own IRA that you just control without using some type of LLC structure. You still would have Advanta IRA or some other company involved as the administrator for the IRA account, but the 401k rules allow you to be your own trustee. With IRAs, you have to have a third-party trustee. That's where Advanta IRA comes into the picture, and that's where a checkbook LLC is needed. But a checkbook IRA and a solo 401k are not the same. An IRA and solo 401k are different types of retirement vehicles. Yep, someone asked, is this recorded for later viewing? Yes, we are recording today's webinar. You can certainly share this link. A link will be sent to everyone who registered, even those who attended live. So you're more than happy to send that link out to people. We also have a great YouTube page with all of our past webinars and our podcasts. We have an Advanta IRA podcast, and those are listed on our YouTube page. As we try to wrap up here with a couple more questions and then get through the last few slides. Can a multi-member LLC be formed between disqualified persons? Say, can a husband and a wife, I'm assuming both use their IRA account to invest in the same LLC? And again, the answer is yes, as long as you set it up at the outset. So if each spouse, say, has $50,000, they want to put it into an LLC together, they can do that. And the LLC will be owned 50% by the husband's IRA, 50% by the wife's IRA, and you cannot change those percentages going forward. But you could certainly use the cash in that account for any investment. So it is possible to form a multi-member LLC between disqualified persons. You just have to set the percentages up front, and you can't change them going forward. Can I buy the investment directly on the solo K if it has checkbook control? Yes, you can simply, if you have a solo 401k and you're able to open up your own bank account, you do not need to use an LLC, and you can buy the property directly in the name of the 401k. The other question is, self-directed IRA, is it ERISA protected? ERISA is some of the laws that help created retirement plans in this country. I heard 401k is protected, or 401k is protected, but solo 401k, I'm sorry, as heard 401k is not protected, but 401k solo K is. That's a great question for an attorney or to take offline. It's a little bit deep to get into on the webinar today, so I'm happy to take that call offline. Both IRAs and 401ks have their protections from bankruptcy laws in each state and federal protections. They have different rules. If you do engage in something that is prohibited, there are different penalties as to whether you're using an IRA or a solo 401k to do it. So there are some differences there when you're doing different types of investments. So again, thanks for those great questions. I do want to kind of make sure we end on time today. I mentioned earlier, if you're looking to get more information, meet other individuals to learn about investments, we do an event called Pitch, Promote, and Prosper. Our next one is on Friday, December 15th, coming up in a week and a half or so. We do these once a month. They're from noon to about 1:30. We give everyone who attends a chance to talk, share what they're either looking to buy, or what they're looking to sell, what they're looking to learn. And you can register on our website. Again, we do those about once a month. So everybody that attends gets a chance to talk, whether you're just there to learn and to network. But that's kind of our commitment, again, to education, helping foster a good investment community and people sharing ideas, sharing information. But again, if you're looking for something in person, I would recommend going to something like Eventbrite or Meetup, Googling your city or your town's name and real estate investing, and see if you find local groups in your area as well. If you're looking to get started, it doesn't take very long to get an account opened. It takes 15 minutes or so to fill out the paperwork. The rollover, the transfer of funds from your current custodian can take anywhere between a a few days to a few weeks, depending on who that other custodian is and how they'll send the funds to us. And then it's, step 3, get started. Start investing, find an investment, whether it's, we talked specifically today about active investing, but certainly passive investments. We have some clients who do pretty much only active investments. We have clients who do only passive investments. And as you guessed, we have clients who do both. So it's really what strategy you feel most comfortable with, or if you're comfortable with both, you can certainly do anything within a self-directed IRA. That's the beauty of these types of accounts, is the investment flexibility that you have. So I want to thank everybody for attending that attended live today. If you listened to the recording, thank you as well for listening to the recording. If anyone has any questions, again, of what we talked about today, maybe something I didn't cover or something you need me to expound on a little bit, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at the number below. Shoot me an email. You can certainly visit our website at advantaira.com. And I'll say it again, if you're looking for just other great content and information, our YouTube page has all of our recorded past webinars where we featured some good guests on some different investment topics. And there's also a link to all of our Alternative IRA Investing Advantage podcasts hosted by my colleague Alex Fernie, and he brings on a number of good guests there as well. So again, thank you very much everyone for attending today. We look forward to hearing from you.